Good morning. I hope everyone in the Robertsville Broad Top area is doing well. Just wanted to continue kind of our discussion and our looking at every day this week, Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9. And so we're going to start by reading that passage and then we're going to continue to dive into it. Okay? Excuse me. This is what it says. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in the house and when you walk by the way and when you lie down and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and your gates." So as we if you remember, as we looked at this, we start out by saying the idea of hearing something. The hearing is not just letting it go in your ear, but it's actually it being something that affects you, that you actually respond to, that you actually in this case, you don't just hear what God is saying, but you live it out, you obey it. And this was God speaking to his covenant community as he has brought them out of Egypt, out of slavery, out of bondage. And he is helping them to say, okay, this is how it's best for you to live. And knowing that the people of Israel, and as we read through the Torah, we find over and over again, even as Moses is talking to the people, Moses is real honest, you're going to mess up. But God is still faithful. And so he tells them, this is what you need to know. And to begin with that God, there is none like him. He is one, there is one and only one God. And he is above all. And we talked about last week yesterday or the day before, as God brought the people out of Egypt. He did these 10 different plagues or signs. And each of those plagues was him showing not just the people of Israel, but also the people of Egypt, the superpower of that day, right? Showing that their gods were nothing, because each of those plagues corresponded to a deity an idol in the Egyptian religion, and God showed that they're nothing. They have no power. They're made up things, and that only I am God. And then we talked about the commandments of God being on our heart, inscribing our hearts with the commandments of God so that we just naturally live them out. It affects us. It's how we operate comes out of that, because out of our heart comes what we say and what we do. And then in verse 7 it says, "You shall teach them diligently to your children. You should talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise." The idea here is passing on the faith. And there's important ideas here, because I think in the Western faith, Western Christianity, faith is like, well, this is just something I do. But no, here, and even, spiritual formation, training up our kids, well, that's done in a class. But that's not the way God designed that. Those things can be good and can be important, but God tells the people of Israel, if you are a parent, part of your responsibility is to teach your children about faith, and not in just like having a classroom setting, but as you go along. Discipleship is best done not in a classroom, but in the real world. When we look at Jesus and his disciples, they learned about what it meant to live a kingdom life as they were walking along Jesus, as he was going along the way. One of the things I talk about sometimes in ministry is what happens along the way. You can have all these great plans and stuff, but really, real ministry happens as you're just going on your day doing something, and you're given an opportunity, and it becomes, a moment that you can do that. With our kids, we're given the opportunity of time with them. And really what God is saying is, view those times as teachable moments. Because if the commandments of God and our relationship with God is so important to us that it is inscribed on our hearts, then guess what? As we go about our day, they'll just kind of pop out. And so God's saying, remember, these things. Tell them to your kids. Talk about what it means as you're doing them, as you're going places, because that's how important they are. It's not just, okay, here are the rules that we need to do in these cases. Essentially, God's saying, I'm trying to show you how to live. And so as you live, tell your kids about why you do what you do, why you think the way you think, why, you operate the way you operate, why when, Christian perspective, when someone treats you hatefully and you treat them with love, that's an opportunity to, if your kids witness that, to have a conversation that, you know what, this is why we do that. I know it's weird, but this is the way God called us to live. Doesn't take too much time. You don't have to have, a degree in early childhood development or theology to say, I felt God was calling me to do that, so I did that. It's simple. I think a lot of times we complicate things like that, but this was important enough to God to tell the people of Israel that it was in kind of their foundational statement of faith, that this is how important it is to pass down the faith, to show your kids, it's a real deal. I've known a lot of people who their parents were involved in the church, even some pastors, that when you talk to their kids, and their kids are adults at this point, they talk about one of the problems they have with church is their parents acted one way here and acted another way at home, and it really didn't connect. And that's part of what God is saying here. It always has to connect. Because if it is truly on our heart, we're going to be living it out. And honestly, we have the good news as Christians. And that changes everything. And it should change the way we talk. It should change what we talk about. It should change our activity. And when it does, we should say, this is why we do this. Because this is part of what it means to be a Christian. I'm reminded of it's Amish community that a guy came in several years ago, and he came up with the intent to do horrible things to some girls in that community. He ends up going into the schoolhouse, shooting a bunch of them, and then he ends up, I think he turned the gun on himself, or he was shot in the crossfire, but he ends up dying. And this community, this Amish community, they didn't have, health insurance. And so you had all of this money. I think they had $4 million above what it costs to take care of the survivors and the funerals and all those things. $4 million above and beyond what they needed was provided through like GoFundMe and stuff like that. Just kind of amazing thing. But they were trying to figure out what to do with that money. And they were meeting, their community elders were meeting, and one of the elders brought up, well, what about this man's family? Because he's dead. They've lost two. And so they came to this man's family. He had several kids and a wife. And they came to her and they told her, we want to make sure that your kids go to college. We want to take care of you too. And this Amish community who had lost many of their young girls, and many of them had been, had shot and injured and were still in the hospital. They gave the widow of this guy who caused all this $1 million so that her children would be able to go to college, so that they would be taken care of. And so a reporter came up to one of them during this and was just kind of flabbergasted and really didn't understand it, and asked one of the elders, well, why are you doing this? This guy's, the guy who was married to her and the kids, he came in and killed your children. Why would you do this? Why would you show? And they said that they don't hold anything, and everyone, and they actually even forgave that guy, even though he's dead, but they didn't hold anything against this family. And so this reporter didn't get it. And so the elder just looked at them and said, "We're Christians. That's what we do." And that was one of those teachable moments that they were acting out their faith, and someone asked a question. And they just said, "That's what we do." This community, the commandments of God as they understood them, were on their heart, were inscribed in their heart so much that when this terrible thing happened, and they could have, blamed and had problems still and been frustrated with the family of this man who killed their children, who killed himself. Instead, they sought out that family, and sought to take care of them too, because they're Christians. That's what we do. We forgive, we love, and we take care of. That's an example of doing things along the way, explaining to our children, and really to anyone who asks, and not even people that ask, but as we do it, we can use those moments. We did that. Yes, that's different. We did that because that's what it means to follow after Jesus. Hope you guys are doing well. Think about today. What are the ways that we pass on our faith? What are the ways that as we go about, as we're going on our way, as we sit down, as we lie down, as we rise, as we're around the dinner table, as we're out shopping, as we are at our job, what are the ways that we live out our faith and then also share it in those ways as we go along the way? Think about that. Have a good day.